will be interesting. I thought I was following an accountant, not the rock, so this is going to be fun. When we were first asked to have a look at providing this, Sophie said, we've got four categories we'd like you to address, pick one. Couldn't do that, picked all four. Just going to read briefly for you what this presentation aims to address with TechPlas's first proprietary and very innovative product. So first off, we're looking to address the industry research process used to establish the need for a product such as this in the market, while also addressing the scaffolding and access industry as an industry that has not previously been exposed to PVC, vinyl, or high quantities of plastic in any major structural component. Looking at addressing the design and engineering required to actually achieve the goals needed for that industry. Run through the market and acceptance that we've received across the country, Australia and New Zealand, and also run through a little bit of the circular life cycle of the product. As you all know, PVC is entirely recyclable, so it makes it a fun product for us. So a little bit about where this product started. It's been about probably 5 years in the running since Grant first sort of looked into this style of product. We have been refining it for about 3.5 years, just over 3 years, and have had product in the market for just over 18 months now, almost 2 years. A little bit about TechPlas Extrusions. For those who don't know, most people in this room will know TechPlas Extrusions. Have been around since 1985, specialists in complex custom profile extrusions. Historically, the business has always been operating on a business-to-business function for the building and construction industry. Have some really large blue chip companies, some of whom are in this room at the moment, and who've been with TechPlas since the beginning. And a lot of that is from complete in-house services offered, everything from engineering, tooling, design, assistance with material choices, all the way down to QC production and management from there. When TechPlas first started to look into offering a proprietary range, this was a good step forward for us to sort of take control of our own destiny and move into that. I'm a youngling. I've only been with the company for 3 years, so I'm still very green with the entire plastics industry, but very, very grateful for what the Vinyl Council does as well. TechPlas was one of the first signatories for the PVC stewardship program, and we have our audit tomorrow for best practice and stewardship as well, which will be exciting. So this, effectively, is the TechBoard. It is an over-engineered plank. It is a common timber size, and that's what we're looking at replicating. It's 235mm by 40mm. Very common timber size, has applications well and far beyond just the scaffolding and access industries. Things such as noise retaining walls, noise barriers on freeways, looking at edgeboard formwork and boardwalks, pedestrian access, general usage. We've also been approached for planking on submarines and things along the lines of temporary seating as well. So let me try pull it out. So hexagonally reinforced. For those who want to have a bit of a closer look, I'm happy to throw one around. So what we've done here is optimized both geometry and material choice to produce a long-lasting, lightweight, recyclable, chemically and customizable product that is an ideal timber alternative. So what we've realized within the scaffolding industry, this is where we started, this is where we realized the volume was of this particular product. LVL, laminated veneer lumber, very common formwork and scaffolding product. It's a thinly sheet laminated timber, often a radiata pine or something similar, laminated within a formaldehyde resin. Most common product used for scaffolding timbers in the industry. Within the industry there is also steels and aluminiums that go in. We were looking at going in specifically with the timber replacement. Sorry, I just realised there were three of my pictures are covering up important information. It's all right, I'll tell you. For those of you who don't recognise the building we're currently standing in, this is the Amora Hotel. It's approximately 1,400 square metres and 110 metres tall. The reason that's important is because every year from our research, from discussions with the 5 major scaffold players in Australia and multiple smaller ones, every year almost 1 million cubic metres of this timber is thrown out, just under around 970,000. This was backed up recently by the Australian National Waste Report for, let me pull it up. For construction and industrial waste. The reason I put this hotel there is because if you removed all of the walls and all of the flooring and wanted to rebuild it out of the waste scaffold that ends up straight in construction waste, it's not something that's recycled at all. Some timber recoverers will come in and take them and build innovative things with them, but it's a very, very small percent, less than 1% actually goes into recycling. Can't be burned. It's not a good product to burn, so on site, as Barack mentioned, the construction is a very, I was going to say nasty area, but they don't look after their equipment at all. And especially when something like a timber board, which historically for hundreds of years has been a consumable, is slightly damaged, goes straight into the skip bin on site. What's important about that as well is these products, the timber boards that are out there are so easily damaged, and that's where our product comes quite useful. But things like water seepage, water gets into these boards on a hot day and they'll start to warp and twist. Obviously animal rot, unless you've paid extra for the boards that you want to avoid having insects and creepy crawlies in. Completely flammable, more so with the resin as well. And as soon as they're damaged, warranty is void and they go straight in the skip bin. From that, 1,400 square metres, 110 metres tall, million cubic metres of this one particular product going into the industry, you'd be able to redo this entire building 75 times over, top to bottom, just with the timber that goes into landfill. 75 times. When we first started, we couldn't believe the numbers, the quantity of timber that gets used and bought in every year. Most of it's manufactured locally, some of it's manufactured overseas and imported. So this is where we came in with the TechBoard, a very industry-specific solution. Where the timber is useful, you can see it down the bottom, the TechBoard integrates perfectly with it, so customers who didn't want to necessarily change their entire stock all at once are able to just substitute the TechBoard for it. This is quite useful in environments where the timber is particularly not suited. Areas where high levels of water and sewage, wastewater treatment is what was one of our first customers going into those areas. Looking at particularly clean environments, so dairy, food preparation, pharmaceuticals, and those sorts of areas. Some of the other significant issues that popped up with the timber products while we were looking at this came across the OH&S front. Each one of these timber boards, if it's 3 metres long, is weighing just over 20 kilos. Our board at that will weigh just under 12. So the standard tech board at 4.5 kilos a metre, 4 kilos a metre at the moment. Significantly less weight, easier to move around. What I've got shown here is our first site that we set up almost 2 years ago in WA. This one has been out in the West Australian sun with no issues for almost 2 years now. Gone through a couple of the hottest summers they've seen there. Now on the left here was our first wastewater treatment facility, also in WA. We found the market there is a lot higher just for the type of scaffolding they use. So the scaffolding market has 2 major types. One of those is a system scaffold. It's what you'll see if you look out the window. For construction, it's a quick stage, layer, names like that get thrown around a lot. Steel scaffold or aluminium scaffold that drops into its own system. What the TechBoard has been designed for is a system known as tube and fit. It's a traditional method, came out of the UK. The best guys in Australia who know how to do it are all expats, or they're from New Zealand where they get excellent training. So tube and fit applications are more for industrial areas, which is why this plays in quite well for us. It allows us to trial the board in a variety of areas, make sure that it has no adverse effects to most chemicals, different amounts of sunlight and things like that. It's also given us the opportunity to adapt and continually follow through with R&D. Just make sure I didn't miss anything. With this particular product, as I said, we've had it out in the market for 2 years. So far, same product that's been out there with no issues. One of the major issues with the timber boards is that they require a huge amount of maintenance to maintain. If you don't maintain them properly, if the scaffolders in the yard become a bit lax, let a bit of water seep in, they will rot, they will warp, they will twist, and there is a whole page and a half of instructions for storage of these products. With ours, it's a hell of a lot simpler. Just stack them up straight or leave them on a flat surface and there's no worries at all. So what we've found, even the best well-maintained timber scaffold boards won't last longer than about 2 years. We've heard tales of up in Brisbane where someone's put timber scaffold boards on a site, 45-degree day, for some reason it's Brisbane, northern Queensland, it decided to rain that day. Next day they've come back, all of their timber boards have warped and twisted because they got soaked through and then heated up. So what we're looking at the moment is a 5-year life cycle, including costs that we've built through with some of our scaffolding partners, including things like transport and maintenance and assembly on site for the amount of staff required. As you can see here, both of these guys happily carrying 3-metre boards. That's legal by OH&S. Illegal to do that with the timber boards, too heavy. So initial costs up front tend to be a bit more expensive than the timber boards. Initial partners that we've grouped with a couple of years ago saw the savings very early on after a couple of years worth of having the TechBoard on site. After that 2 years, they'd be looking at replacing and buying new timber stock anyway. Some of the other things you might see here as well, PVC, the TechBoard has quite a high ultimate strength, where it will deflect slightly more than timber. It is not going to snap or break. We've overloaded it to 3.5 tonne, and no breaking, no snapping, just deflects a little bit more. If you do that to the timber boards, you have a similar situation that it's at the top there, snap in the middle and people falling through them. It's not an ideal situation when you're about 60 stories up. Also on top of that, OH&S regulations, as I mentioned, lightweight, and things like splinters. The amount of scaffolders I've spoken to who have hands like cheese graters is phenomenal. Currently, this product is entirely manufactured in our Pendle Hill facility, little hexagon at the bottom there. And a couple of these red lines, which were high potential sites, have actually just become actual sites, which is quite exciting for us. We've got some heading offshore. Exciting. As you can see from the graph, we are looking to have a completely circular life cycle with this product, making sure that product that goes out can come back to us, and we're looking at offering a rebate to the industry as that happens. So instead of every year, every 2 years having to go out and buy your timber stock, every 5 years buy a set of TechBoards, bring back your old damaged ones, we should be able to regrind them and turn them back into the exact same TechBoards. These products here, as was mentioned a few times, not only recyclable, but these are also partly recycled. So recycled within themselves. And that was an important distinction that I think we saw in the last couple of days, was that there are products on the market similar that are made from recycled materials, and an FRP-based product comes out of Wales. Apart from the fact that it's black and it does melt in the Australian sun, doesn't pass any of the standards in Australia and New Zealand, which are some of the strictest in the world, but it's also not recyclable, which means that a completely circular life cycle isn't possible. With ours, it is. It's a hard slog, and it's going to be very difficult for us to get the logistics of this working, especially seeing as most of our customers are well and truly outside of New South Wales. But we are looking to set up logistics and recovery of the TechBoard through Australia to start, and eventually New Zealand, but we've also got a few customers at the moment. Also wanted to run through quickly how we got about to where we are at the moment. As I mentioned, similar products have popped up overseas in the past. Completely non-compliant. We needed to make sure that these were compliant with Australian and New Zealand standards, and at the same time we did the whole kit and caboodle, did all the standards internationally, which I'll run through in a second. This was basically our NPD process. We ran through full engineering design, structural design of the profiles, full FEA slew that was run over the course of about 8 months. From then we did different materials, assemblies at the back as well, and our in-house team developed a different set of materials which we have within our patent for the product that allow it to both be impact resistant and resist the deflection that's necessary for the testing. We do all of our in-house testing as well as sending out for tests as well. So basic QC for us, we test our board from every pack before it goes. Oh, also on site, just quickly, we did physical trials when we first started. You can see the multicolours. We did that to know which boards had which materials in them. When we first started, we found out that the Australia-New Zealand standard for scaffolding happens to not only have any reference to plastic or polymers in it, it is also the most stringent in the world. It has 6 different components that you have to meet for a standard timber scaffold board, where every other one either has 1 or 2. And that's also an issue because testing for scaffold boards in Australia is point load, not very nice for plastics. Everywhere else in the world it's all a distributed load, which makes it interesting. We've tested out for the Australian, New Zealand, Japanese, European, Great British, different standards, South African, Canadian and American, also different standards for scaffold boards. 2 different NATA-approved testing agencies. Within the standard, it does have a clause for an alternative material. We didn't want to go down that path. We felt as though that might have been cheating. Something we'd seen elsewhere in the industry, but scaffolders were not overly fond of using a product that had become compliant through an alternative method. So we made sure we tested it to what they knew and what they could trust. This is something we continue to do. We've got more boards being sent out for testing, making sure that everything's still compliant as we go. As I mentioned, there is no mention of plastics in these standards. It was something that we've been working closely with a few different organisations in Australia and New Zealand to try and adapt. We made a slight alteration to the standard. It was AS/NZS 1577-2013. They have a new model coming out this year which has a reference to our adaptation just for plastic. We didn't do it specifically for our product, although it is very helpful, basically comparing loading and deflection details, making sure that the scaffolders who are using them know how to use them safely. Little things come across such as retaining methods for them, making sure that when they're retained properly, significantly higher strength to span ratios. Those ones. This is where I think the title of the speech comes in a little bit. The market entry and acceptance, as a lot of people have seen, is completely, it's a very difficult entry into a market that's never been exposed to a PVC product before, or even a different product before. We started early on looking for industry partnerships with companies who we knew were well educated and can see the immediate benefits, and also the long-term benefits. We found a couple of those across the country and one in New Zealand, who were very happy to sort of trial new products. They were well and truly fed up with the timber products. Something we hear quite common is if they could replace timber in a day, they would. And so it's growing a fair bit at the moment. When we started with this, we started with the end users and the contractors, going straight through to the scaffolders. Interesting group of people, very, very strong, very set in their ways, and it was a matter of determining the method to get them to use the product to start. Once it's been used, everybody seems to love it. It's just getting over that first hurdle for us. Recently, we've been moving further into industry associations and specifiers. Australia, unfortunately, doesn't have a scaffold-specific industry association, which would be brilliant if they could change. The New Zealanders, on the other hand, do have an industry association, which we're quite close with. As I mentioned, there have been a couple of products in the past released into this industry which have given plastic, for those who are looking for it, a particularly bad name. Products that were not compliant even with the standards in the countries they were coming from, and very much not suited to the Australian climate or the kind of conditions that people were putting them into. Most people like these kind of boards to go into clean environments or hazardous environments where the timber's not suited. The boards that were going into there very much not suited and causing a great amount of headaches for someone like us trying to come through a few years later, and they've had a bad experience over a decade ago of products that shouldn't have been introduced into that market. On the left here, a few of the companies and areas that we have it set up in. As you can see, the water corporations and wastewater treatment plants tend to be quite common. It is a great product for when it's getting flooded out with excrement. A company called AEG was one of our first partners over in Perth. And down the bottom we've got a couple of our newer ones, Westland Milk Products and Nail and Scaffolding over in New Zealand. Really great company, sent a container over for them recently. This is an interesting one. Because we've been doing R&D on the run so much, we are a small enough company and we're adaptable enough to be able to fix issues as soon as they crop up. PVC, not in this industry, that had issues come up that they wouldn't have expected, they've never seen before, something like timber or steel or aluminium. Little things there, static build-up. Hollow constructions was one where they don't often see red-bellied black snakes or giant huntsmans trying to crawl inside a timber board. In ours, if we don't end cap them, it can happen. And the other one, which is when you've got large gentlemen who are used to hoiking 20 to 40 kilos over their head up onto a scaffold, who are now doing something that weighs half of that, they tend to throw them further. So there's a little bit of re-education along the way. The boards are lighter and they do need less energy to be moved around. So from this industry collaboration, we have developed a range of accessories. Safety ramps, which was one that came out in New Zealand when boards are on top of each other. If you have boards that will often lap over the top of each other to fix a gap, like this, we've developed a safety ramp, top left up there, in conjunction with Scaffolding and Rigging New Zealand, to basically avoid that trip hazard. On top of that, simple end caps, completely customizable for the customer as well. Hard to see, but it's a good way to trace where the boards are coming from if someone's trying to steal them, which is also quite common in the scaffolding industry. Over a metre, it also makes the boards buoyant. Joining sections, which are our simple, very, very simple, giant straight joint solution to stopping boards from sliding around. Scaffolders have found these particularly useful. Within all of these accessories as well, we've also had to look at mitigating the static build-up, which is why the accessories range also comes in a conductive option. A little bit of an exercise. 2 of the sites we had them on, so we've had them on mine sites and underground testing. Tested our accessories, as Brett mentioned, it's toxicity of smoke. We tested it for the underground coal mining standard for the boards and the accessories. That includes toxicity of smoke, also things like static build-up, flammability, ignitability. We wanted to make sure that as soon as they went into this underground coal mine in WA, there wasn't going to be an issue there of something sparking and something going kaboom. We've done this in conjunction with the Static Control Association of Australia. Yes, it exists, it is very small, but they are a very helpful group of people. When I was there last September, we had boards on these 2 sites. One was a milk powder processing plant in New Zealand. One was our underground coal mine just off the top fixing a fascia in WA. Talking to them about the possibility of us sending out all of these conductive accessories to stop static build-up and discharge and explosions. Raise your hand if you think coal dust is going to be more flammable. Coal dust, flammable? Yes, no? Or milk powder? Milk powder more flammable? Carbon, coal dust more flammable? In the same concentration and dispersed the same way, milk powder, because it's an organic material and it's got a lot of fatty acids in it, significantly more flammable. Made sure we sent them a couple of packs of the conductive accessories as soon as we got back into the state. So that's most of what we've run through. I'm sure I've missed things, so happy to take questions and answers along the way. Thank you very much.